Well, you're very welcome, everybody, this week to Inclusion Dialogue. This week, I have the pleasure of speaking with Professor Sujata Bhan. Sujata is from India and is very kindly taking this interview with me after the working day. So, Sujata, I appreciate that. Sujata, it's very lovely to have you on the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. But could you just, first of all, just explain to the readers, perhaps, I think it's quite an interesting question to ask all our academics on Inclusion Dialogue, is how you ended up working in the space of inclusive education. We'd love to hear about that if you would.
Hi, Joanne Banks. It's entirely my pleasure to be here on this podcast. I'm looking forward to some interesting conversation with you. How did I land up in this? Well, I am a student of psychology initially. I did my master's and MPhil in psychology in a city called Chandigarh in northern India.
Okay.
Then I got married and I came to Bombay.
Okay.
And I was looking around for jobs, and I just came to know through somebody that SNDT Women's University has recently advertised for a post of a teaching faculty and in the Department of Special Education. At that point of time, I didn't have any clue what special education was.
Yes.
So I just
Mm.
took a chance. I said, let me apply and let me see. As luck would have it, they had a vacancy for a psychologist because, as a part of the course, you have to study core papers, which one of them is psychology. So my interview happened, and I think I fared well, and I got the job.
Yes.
But from the time I got the job, my then head of the department was very keen that I learn more about special education.
Mm.
So then she made me attend all the lectures happening in the department for full 1 year. And that got me very interested in the field. And I said, okay, now I have to study more in special education. So then I did my bachelor's in special education, and then I pursued my PhD in special education. Now, in our country, there is a shift from special education to inclusive education.
Mm.
And for last, I would say about 10 years, I have become a proponent of inclusive education through our course, though it is for special education, but we also train our students for inclusive education. And I passionately believe in inclusive education. So you can say I'm doing both parallelly, special education as well as inclusive education. And I have completed 32 years in this
Wow.
department.
Wow.
I started as an assistant lecturer, and today I'm a professor and heading the Department of Special Education.
Wow, that's fascinating, Sujata. I'm really intrigued at how your head of department asked you to sit in on lectures for an entire year. What a clever way to start your career! But also, you're coming at this from a psychology background, into special education, and then somehow over time, then you're firmly in the inclusive education research space. So that's such expertise right there. But the 32 years is possibly the most shocking comment you made. Um, I'll talk to you a moment in a little while about SNDT, your university. But I'd love to just hear, you mentioned your students. Can you talk to our listeners a little bit just about you're in teacher education. What does a teacher education qualification look like in India for pre-service teachers? Obviously focusing on the area of inclusion.
Yeah. See, we have a bachelor's in special education program and a master's in special education program. And you have to be a graduate in science stream, art stream, or commerce stream. We have basically these streams, these three streams at the graduation level. So you could be coming from any stream, and then
Yeah.
you have to appear for a common entrance test, which is done at the government level, at the state level. And then you give your preference whether you want to go for general education, that is a B.Ed general ed program,
Yes.
or you want to go for special education, that is B.Ed special education program. And similarly, if you want to do masters, then you have to have a B.Ed in special education to do a master's program in special education, or a B.Ed general education to do a master's program in general education. So our B.Ed program is of 2 years, and so is the master's program. So in our department, we are offering B.Ed in visual impairment, learning disability, and intellectual disability. So these three disabilities. And in M.Ed also, we offer all the three disabilities. So we have 6 programs which are recognized by our regulatory body, which is Rehabilitation Council of India, a of India body, a statutory government of India body, you can say. So they regulate all the programs in special education in the entire country. So we have to be accredited by this governing body. If they approve of the course, then only we can run the course. And they give you a recognition for a year, for 2 years, or 3 years, or maximum 5 years. So after 5 years, we have to again apply for recognition. So same is the case with general B.Ed programs. They have a different governing body, National Council of Teacher Education. So they will recognize their B.Ed programs, and once they are recognized, then only they can offer the programs. So that is about our B.Ed and M.Ed. Besides this, we also offer PhD in special education in our department, and we also offer PG diploma in management of learning disability. Now, these two programs are not recognized by RCI, that's Rehabilitation Council of India. There are university programs, right?
Okay.
And then we also conduct a lot of programs which are need based. For example, there is a lot of demand of special educators, but we are not able to supply that many. Unfortunately, in a city like Mumbai, where there are many options available for young girls, so not everybody wants to become a teacher and not everybody wants to become a special educator. So our seats lie vacant. Though we do a lot of advertising, we create awareness about the programs, but somehow our numbers are not as per the demand of special educators. So, what is that people look for is short term programs. So, we also offer like a 3 month online weekend programs. One such example I'll give you is shadow teaching course. It's a certificate course. Now, in inclusive education, we have the child with special needs obviously in a mainstream class. Now, depends how much of support needs he requires. The school may be having just one special educator or at the most two special educators who are catering to the needs of all the special children in that school. But there may be one student or there may be more whose support needs are more. They cannot be met with the special educator meeting them once a week or once in 15 days. They want one on one interaction. So that's when the role of shadow teacher comes in. So there is a lot of demand of shadow teachers. They are a bridge between the classroom teacher and the special educator. So she sits in the class with this one child and gives her one on one instruction, remediation. But she is not a special educator. She's done a short term course in special teaching. So, kind of, you can say the IEP developed by the special educator is monitored by the shadow teacher in the classroom and see that whether the class teacher is making the required accommodations for the child and whatever the need the child has. So she's there. So we run a shadow teaching course as well.
Okay.
Right?
So
Yeah.
that's quite interesting. And I'm just wondering, I'm fascinated by your short-term qualification comments. So that's for practicing teachers working in mainstream education who would like to gain more expertise in special education. Is that correct?
No, pre-service. The courses that I
Pre-service.
talked about, they're all pre-service programs.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So after their graduation, they do their B.Ed in special education. So they are
Yes.
pre-service programs.
But the shadow teaching qualification, is that for
No, now that
working
we
teachers?
have kept it open, so it could
Yes.
be a parent. Many a times the parents want to help their child because they are not getting what they need in the
Yes.
school. So then they do these short-term courses. Some teachers also do it, and some, those who are not doing anything but suddenly wake up and are interested in helping children with special needs, but they don't have a graduation. So this is like a short-term course for them. So we are not
Interesting.
rigid about their eligibility. They just
Yes.
have to be higher secondary. That is our 12th, 10th grade, 11th grade,
Yep.
12th grade. So if they've done their 12th grade, we are okay with that because many of our parents may not be graduates. So we want to
No,
keep it open for them. So we are not very
absolutely.
strict about the eligibility there.
So you just spoke there about the pre-service qualification. Can you explain what are the challenges that the pre-service teachers are exposed to in the content of their bachelor and their masters in education? And perhaps you could draw on the topics of where special education meets the broader debates on inclusive education.
Yeah. So, when a student chooses a particular program, like be it in special education, they also have to choose their specialization area. So, to give you an example, I'm interested in be it special education, but I'm more interested in teaching children with intellectual disability. So, all the students, as I told you, there are three programs. We offer three disability areas. So, all the students study the same common core papers and then they study their specialization papers, which could be intellectual disability or any other disability. For practice of teaching, they go to schools meant for special children. In my case, if I've chosen intellectual disability, so my practice of teaching will happen in schools for intellectual disability. But now our country is focusing a lot on inclusive education. So many children with intellectual disability will also be seen in regular mainstream schools. And our students also have job opportunities there. So once they go there, in special schools, generally they are getting an exposure of teaching one on one, at the most 3 4 5 students, not more than that. But when they go to the mainstream school, there may be 30 40 50 students in the class. And also they have to know the pedagogy of school subjects, right? Not just teaching functional academics, but teaching of math, teaching of language, or whatever. So we have papers related to teaching of school subjects as well as part of their course curriculum. That is one. So they're taught the pedagogy of teaching social sciences,
Mm,
math, science, whatever.
curriculum, yes.
Right, right. And at the same time, they're also taught what are the inclusive pedagogies like universal design for learning. So we give them a lot of theory about universal design for learning and then a lot of practical experience as well. So they prepare a lesson plan which is based on UDL principles and they go to a regular mainstream school and there they will implement that. So where they are looking at all the diversities which could be in the class. So now for last, I would say at least 5 to 7 years, they've started following this UDL lesson plan in regular school. Now coming to your question, what are the challenges that they face? Many a times what they see in the schools happening right now, the schools have started taking admission of students who are having any disability, let's again say intellectual disability. But the teachers are not really doing anything with them. They are only physically present in the class, but the teachers are not using any inclusive pedagogies. So when our students go there, they observe this, they are very, demotivated, and also they don't know like why this is happening and how can they make a difference. So they need a lot of input in understanding that it's only going to take some time to bring in the change in the attitude, bring in the change in the level of awareness in the mainstream teachers, the skills that they need to include this child, engage him in the class. It is going to take time, so they should not feel too demotivated and disillusioned. They should
Yeah,
continue learning more about it, sharing that knowledge, practicing that knowledge in the school, and making a difference at least in when they are there, so that the teachers, when they observe them, they see that okay, it works, all the students were engaged. So instead of getting disillusioned, you become a role model for them. They find it challenging, but
of course.
yeah, they find it challenging, but yeah, eventually they get the hang of it slowly, and slowly they
Yeah, we have a very similar um, situation in Ireland in that the students say on the program that I teach on would be exposed a lot to a lot of inclusive pedagogy, inclusive practice, universal design, like you mentioned, and they leave with a lot of hope and before they go on their school placements.
yes,
And then
yes,
when they go on school placements, they're met with a very rigid, well, sometimes met with a very rigid special education system operating in the school, and yeah, it's hard for a younger teacher to start suggesting new practices. I understand that, but I like your idea of just kind of bringing time into the equation and understanding that you can't come in. Uh, Nobody can come in and start introducing change, radical change like that, and it will take time, right?
yes.
Yeah. So can I just take you out of your pre-service program, and we'll go and out of Mumbai, if that's okay, and we'll move to the kind of India context more generally, and perhaps for the listeners, we had one of your colleagues, Jayanti Narayan, on the podcast a couple of years ago, and she gave a lovely interview about the kind of the changes like you're describing in India over time regarding special and inclusive education. But where is inclusive education policy at now in India, and what direction is it headed in?
Yes. Okay. So we had Right to Education Act in 2009. Okay. And then that act underwent an amendment in 2012 where it focused particularly for children with disabilities that they need to be included. In 2009, it just spoke about out of school children, those who are marginalized, they all had to be brought into mainstream education. And in 2012, they made an amendment to it that particularly focus on children with disabilities who have to be included in mainstream education. So that was very good. Then in 2016, a new act came, which was Rights of Persons with Disability Act, which again focused on inclusive education and making reasonable accommodations to have these students in the mainstream class. So now, when we have the legal mandate, schools started, they had no choice, but they started taking in children with disabilities, particularly the government schools, what you call the public schools. So they started taking in children with disabilities. It was mandatory. And the movement that was the flagship program of RT Act was called Sarva Shiksha, that means education for all. So, under that program, Education for All, the enrollment of students with disabilities in mainstream schools increased tremendously, right? But what was being done in the class with those students, the study proved, research was done about seeing the success of this Education for All program. What was revealed was that these children are not really engaged, they are not participating. What I mentioned earlier, physical inclusion has taken place, but not so much academic inclusion. And social inclusion in some cases, see again, India is a very diverse country. So, what works in one place does not necessarily mean it will work everywhere. So, we have rural and urban India, we have different languages, we have different school formats. So, it's very difficult to say that one thing applied at one place will work the same way everywhere. So, we have different models working in different parts of the country. Now, after that, our new education policy, that is the national education policy in 2020, came about, which again focused on equitable and inclusive education. So, as far as the policies and the acts are concerned, our country is right now in that state where the government is pushing for quality education, equitable education for all the marginalized students, including those with disabilities. So the status right now is that the government is taking a lot of initiatives for capacity building of in-service teachers, the mainstream regular teachers. Okay, so at the government level, at the state, see, education in our country is a state subject. So all the initiatives are eventually implemented by the state government. So the directives come from the center and they're implemented at the state level. So a lot of capacity building programs are happening right now, which include creating awareness about the disability per se. Then, of course, how do you include these children, the various inclusive pedagogies, and so on and so forth. Also, at the pre service education level, changes are happening. Earlier, our program for the general B.Ed was such that there was one optional paper for inclusive education. And most of the students wouldn't even opt for it, right? But when all these acts and policies came into being, the government made that paper compulsory. Whether it's NCT, that is the regulatory body, they develop the curriculum. So they made this paper on inclusive education compulsory. Everybody had to do this paper, but there was not much emphasis on the practical aspect of it. So they would just study theoretically, but if they have a child with disability in the class, they were not really equipped to deal with it. So now, presently, what the government is doing, they are asking both the regulatory bodies for the general education as well as that for the special education to relook at the curriculum, so that the curriculum is such that A teacher who's doing general education is given the training in handling, in managing children with not just disabilities, all those who come from the marginalized section. Similarly, those who are doing B.Ed in special education are also trained in teaching school subjects for children who are having disabilities in the mainstream school. So we are now working on an integrated program of 4 years, which is called Inclusive and Special Education Integrated Program. It's a 4 year degree program after the 12th, which focuses on inclusive and special education, integrated education for all pre-service teachers. Similarly, in general education also they have ITEP program, which is integrated training, a teacher training program, which again is done after 12th. So when they have this 4 year integrated program, they're expected, like we are developing the curriculum in such a manner that both, it's actually functioning parallelly. You're a general ed teacher, but you're catering to children with disabilities. You're a special ed teacher, but you're catering to children who have no disabilities. So, both the teacher training program should be so comprehensive and inclusive that no matter what you have done, when you're out there in the class, you're able to manage all children. Also, as far as the in service teachers are concerned, those who have done special education in our country so far, they have not got their due. They've always been treated as like second class citizens to those who have done general education. Oh, she's a special educator. And they are looked down upon by their fellow teachers who are general teachers, and the salaries are also not the same. So now to take care of that, the regulatory body, that is the National Council for Teacher Education, those who are governing the general B.Ed programs, they are coming up with a bridge course for special educators who have done their B.Ed. They will do a 6 month bridge course so that they are equipped with skills. When they go in the classroom, they're able to teach math, science, any school subject. Now, these are already in service teachers. So, how do they bridge the gap? So, they do this bridge course of 6 months. Then they are just as, we bring in the parity between them and the general class teachers. So, that course is also being developed right now. So, I would say that in India, a lot of good work is happening because the government has taken the cognizance of the fact that inclusive education is the answer, right? So, whatever it takes to make that happen, not just like a rhetoric, but really that all the students are engaged and are participating, they are achieving, learning outcomes. There is learning happening. So, whatever it takes to achieve that, the government is taking such steps. Having said that, it does not mean that the special schools will not be there. There will be still students whose support needs are more, like those who are not having disabilities in a mild form, but they have severe and profound form. And if their needs cannot be met in a regular school, then whatever the school format, that model is also to be made available for those children. So the special schools will continue to be here. Training for special educators will continue to be there.
So you were talking there, Sujata, about the developments in India at the moment in relation to kind of government engagement with the topic of inclusion and changes in the demographies of the student, but also then changes in the types of provision or capacity building you described it as, which I think is fascinating. Can I ask? The government seem quite open to change and development. Are they bringing in expertise from academia, from higher education, in order to inform those decisions?
Yes. So now when we are talking about developing this curriculum, so they take experts from NCTE as well as RCI.
Okay.
So you have, a group of people who come from general education, together those who are from the special education, together these committees sit and are developing the curriculum. So yes, they are taking the expertise.
Mm.
Absolutely.
And to what extent does research and research evidence play a role? Is that factoring in terms of the types of decisions in terms of curriculum design and changes in teacher training, if you like?
Well, I will be honest with you. As far as the research is concerned, Indians do a lot of good work, but we are
Mm.
very bad in documenting our work. So when you talk about data,
Yeah.
we may not have many researchers which say inclusive education is better than special education. There are researchers, but not many. Similarly, there may be researchers which question inclusive education because the facilities that are there in the mainstream schools are not enough. So you'll find a lot of data stating that it is just physical inclusion and the child's needs are not being met, so we should not promote inclusive education. There'll be researches like that also. But overall, I wouldn't say it's research driven, but it's more philosophical. And also because we are signatories to UNCRPD and
Yes.
internationally, we know that inclusion works better. Keeping in mind our diversity, our context, as I said earlier, special schools are here to stay. We will not ever close them. That I know for a fact, at least not for next 20 years. But inclusion is the answer for many, many students who are just having mild disabilities, sensory disabilities, and we cannot deny them of their rights and segregate them into, into a
Yes.
special school. So maybe not so much data driven, maybe not so much research driven, maybe more on based on the epistemology, more
Yes.
on philosophy that we are promoting inclusive education.
Yes, yes, indeed. And thank you for explaining it so clearly for us as well. It's really, really great. Can I ask a little bit, if I bring you back to your university, can you describe to listeners what your university is like? And I know it's a women only university, and I think for international listeners, that'll be something that they'd like to know a little bit more about, if you would.
That's a very interesting question, and I would love to share this story with you. The university was founded in 1916. We just celebrated our 109th foundation day of the university. And it was started by a social reformer called Maharishi Karve. Maharishi means a saint. Now, that was the time when the widows, before coming to that, the girls were married at a very young age, like at the age of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they were
Wow.
married. And if for any reason the husbands would die, even if the girl had not yet shifted to her husband's house, she would be treated as a widow, and the
Wow.
widows had to go through a very pitiable, very pathetic life. They could not remarry, they could not eat a certain kind of food, non vegetarian, totally out, spicy food, totally out. They had
Wow.
to live a life of I don't know how to describe that in English, like uh, not enjoy life basically. Uh, Very simple and actually pathetic life. And they were not given any education, nothing. They could not sleep on a bed, they had to sleep on the floor, and so many such things. Their hair had to be chopped off. They were living a very, very sad life. That was the practice. So Maharishi Karve felt that this was a wrong practice of our country and we had to remove this practice. And he set it by an example. He married a widow, which was
Wow.
a big thing at that time because widow remarriage was not allowed at all. And then he said that it's only through education that we can change their life and we can empower them so that they are aware of their rights and they can live a more decent life and not this life of misery. So he started with 5 widows, and the first 5 ladies who graduated was in 1921. And then he was actually taking money, going from pillar to post, collecting money so that he could set up first a school, then a college, and so on. And then the name of our university is Shrimati Nathi Bai Damodar Thakursi University, Women's University. Now, this was a Gujarati family, a business family, and they came in and they gave funds to set up the university. Yeah. And then it got registered with our University Grants Commission and became a state university. And what started with 5 students, today we have 70,000 students in different colleges affiliated to SNDT in 7 states of our country, right? And the identity of the university is only women's university, and it's the oldest in South Asia, oldest women's university in South Asia. And we want to retain that identity because All said and done, even today, there is a gender discrimination in our country. So many parents feel more safe and secure in sending their daughters for higher education in SNDT because they know it's only women's university. So that is something we believe in. So that will be our identity forever. And we believe in empowering our girl students in all the various faculties. So they have law, they have nursing, they have chemistry, they have arts, they have fashion designing, they have management, they have engineering, everything, so that the girls are not denied of any discipline, STEM education, or anything, and they stand at par with the men. So yeah, that is our
Oh,
philosophy.
what a story. That's fascinating. I'm so glad you explained that so clearly to us today as well. It's really interesting to hear that. I suppose that the opportunities are there, because my next question was, in education, is it predominantly women like it is here in Ireland? It's predominantly women who teach. In India, is it the same?
Not in other universities, no. But if you see the percentage, I'm sure the women are more in number than the men. In our university, definitely. Our
Yes,
vice
of course.
chancellor
Yes,
will always be a woman, but other
yes,
administrative positions are given to men as well. So we do have men faculty, but definitely there are more women. And
yes,
somehow, earlier on, not anymore, but earlier on, teaching as a profession was considered to be more for women, like a stereotype.
yes,
You go in
yes,
the morning and you're back by noon, and then you can look after your family and children. That was the stereotype. And I wouldn't say it's gone completely even today,
mm,
right? So you will find more women in teaching profession than men, but it's not a 9 to 5 job anymore. It's very demanding, very corporate like, and yeah. So but women are ready to do that. They're ready
yes,
for it now. So no
yes,
matter whether it's teaching or any other job, our women are very smart, and they take just any job like any other man. So women in
yes.
India in general are doing very well for themselves in all the
Great.
fields. Yeah.
That's so wonderful to hear. Sujata, I mean, my connections with you stem back to our connection through Professor Richard Rose, and I mentioned Dianthe already, and the Disability Research Network that's convened in India. And I know you've been doing lots and lots of work over the past couple of years with that network to kind of, I suppose, create a strong discussion around inclusive education from not just India. I'm getting the sense you're bringing in international contexts as well. But I understand that you have a very important conference coming up in 2025, and I'd love you to explain to listeners what that is about and what's your aim with that conference.
Yes. Again, I'm thankful to you for giving me this opportunity to talk about my conference. We started our first international conference in 2019, and we were very fortunate to have Professor Richard Rose as one of our key speakers there. And then in 21, we did an online conference, which was our, we call it ICE 1, International Conference on Education. So ICE 1 was in 2019. And in 21, we had online because we were going through COVID at that time. And now we again have a face-to-face offline International Conference on Education, what we call ICE 3, in the month of January 2025 from 9th to 11th. Now, the theme of this conference is embracing diversity and intersectional experience. Now, I'll briefly explain the concept that when we are talking about inclusion today, we are not just talking about inclusion of children with disabilities. I mentioned our National Education Policy 2020 that particularly focuses on that disability is just one component. There are so many diversities in our country related to our religion, related to our caste, related to our language, related to our socioeconomic background, so on and so forth. So, when we planned this conference, we wanted to bring in all those marginalized sections, talk about that, bring awareness about how they are marginalized and how can we bring them in the mainstream. So this is a platform where we are having international speakers, about 14, 15 of them, and still more are pouring in. And we have also our national speakers who are at very, very senior positions. They will be taking plenary sessions. We'll have panel discussions. We'll have fireside chats, workshops, pre conference workshops, and like that, focusing on various themes. We have different sub themes where we talk about technology, we talk about media, we talk about the legal issues pertaining to the main theme of the conference. So we are trying to make it as comprehensive, as holistic as possible, getting as many renowned speakers as possible, and keeping it open for teachers, parents, and students, and not keeping the fees very high, because
Yeah.
we know in India,
Mm.
we our teachers are not that well paid, so we are trying to attract more and more participation, so our fees are very less, and the venue of the conference is very nice, so the speakers stay there and they have the conference also there to make it convenient for them. And I think it's going to be very interesting, because the variety of themes that we are covering and the kind of speakers that we are having, I think it's going to be, I feel, a fantastic conference. And
Yes.
Professor Richard Rose is our keynote speaker. And yeah, yeah, and we are having Professor Betsy. Her name is Elizabeth Dalton. I'm more,
Yes.
used to calling her Betsy. So Elizabeth Dalton. She's adjunct professor in Rhodes University. She's going to talk about UDL. Then we have Professor Susie Gronseth. She's from University of Houston. She's going to conduct a workshop on integrating technology for inclusive education, and she's also going to talk about the latest version of UDL. And yeah, then we have Professor Mustafa Abi. He's coming from Morocco, Ibn Zohar University. So we are trying to, basically, we have speakers from US, Bhutan, Germany. So basically, we're trying to create a very international flavor to this theme and learn from each other, you know.
Yes.
So
Yes.
sharing the best practices, also sharing what are the challenges we face in our context, and when we discuss, we can come up with, certain common solutions as well. So that is the objective of this conference.
Absolutely. And I think what you're doing there is really, really important. And my goodness, isn't it wonderful that it can take place in person like this now again? Because I do think that's quite significant. But really, what you mentioned there is the comparative piece is often overlooked. And in many ways, it's very difficult to compare country systems. I know that. But there's a huge amount, I think, that us as researchers can learn from other national contexts that have done things maybe differently, discussing the outcomes of certain policy changes or initiatives, different cultural contexts, like you mentioned, and just having those conversations. I think it's really important that it's great if teachers are part of your audience as well, because they too can inform the higher level discussions, perhaps around more conceptual theoretical pieces. So I wish you very, very well with that conference. I think it's fabulous. I know I may be contributing on one of the days, so I do look forward to that as well,
And I
Sujata.
would be really happy if you can come physically. That would be really, really nice. So please try for that.
I will try my very, very best. Sujata, I've come to the end of what has been a very enjoyable conversation with you. Is there anything that I've left out today that you'd like to raise with listeners, or any research you'd like to point them to that you'd like to, just before we finish the conversation, I can add the notes that you say maybe to the show notes of the podcast for you?
I would like to add that we strongly believe in universal design for learning, and we always believe that it's a practice that can be done only in regular schools, mainstream schools, where they have children with diverse backgrounds. As a part of our department, we have a small center called Arushi Learning Center, which is catering to needs of children with special needs. It's a special school, but we have just about 25 students there, and they are from moderate to severe with ID, and they are on spectrum. Some are on low vision, cerebral palsy, so on. So then we thought that why couldn't we try UDL with our center itself? So we
Yeah.
did a small research. We are still continuing doing the same. And I recently presented a paper in the University of Worcester. They had a conference on
Oh,
UDL.
yes. Only a
Yeah,
couple of weeks ago.
yes,
That's
so,
right. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So that was very interesting. We trained one of our teachers in the center in the application of UDL, and she implemented that in her class of 5 students. We have only 5 special children in her class, and she tried that on. So for 3 months, she implemented it and she could see the change in her teachings. She could see the change in how the students are responding. So she documented everything. As I said, we do a lot of work, but we don't document. So she was asked to document it as and when she was, throughout the process. It's like a case study. So she
Yes.
documented that and she wrote her reflections. She asked the students to reflect on their learning and how did they feel it was different, and did they enjoy it more, or did they feel it was just like how the teacher was teaching earlier. But the results were very encouraging. So then now we said, from one class we will implement the same to another class. So we are in the process of training another teacher in another section who's also going to implement UDL in her class. So yeah, so our misconception, I would say, was that it works only in the regular school, but
Yeah.
actually UDL works everywhere. And in the conference I learned that UDL is not just about classroom. It's about
Mm,
changing the whole ethos of an institute, your management, your everything, your whole attitude. If you have UDL as a internalized way of looking at things,
yes.
it is definitely going to help in creating that inclusive environment.
Yeah, and I think that conversation around the difference between UDL and then universal design more generally is
Yes,
increasing, and it's much needed actually,
yes,
because
yes, yes,
a classroom teacher can only do so much, but if they don't have the structures and, as you mentioned, attitudes a few times, in the broader school setting or in the system as a whole, it's a much bigger challenge. So that's fascinating. So we'll watch this space for your next part of that project, Sujata.
yes, definitely,
Sujata,
definitely.
thank you so very much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Same here. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope I did justice to your questions.
You certainly did. Thank you.
All right, then. Bye bye.